In many African cultures, particularly within the Igbo heartland where villages like Umwomaku sit nestled in tradition, marriage is not a private contract between two hearts. It is a bridge built between two worlds. To marry a person is to adopt their lineage, their history, and the very soil of their father's compound. In Umwomaku, the elders often say, if you want to know the nature of the snake, look at the one that birthed it. This philosophy shaped the destinies of Hidalgo, Nwanaka, and Isioma. Though they shared the same playground at Umwomaku Community Primary School and wore the same uniform at Queen of the Rosary College, their paths to womanhood were carved by the shadows of their homes. In order to analyze and understand their individual maiden-defining traits, family backgrounds and marriage prospects. Hidalgo, elegance and pride, high status, rigid and disciplined. Wealthy alliance, high expectations. Nwanaka, grace and resilience, large, communal, and industrious. Community focused, stable. Isioma, beauty and ambition, individualistic, modern, yet scrutinized. Unconventional, path finding. 1. Hidalgo, the burden of the eagle's daughter. Hidalgo was the daughter of the eagle. Her father was a titled man, and her mother was the leader of the August meeting. From her days at Queen of the Rosary, Hidalgo was taught that her movements reflected her father's Ozo title. In Umwomaku, when suitors came for Hidalgo, they did not just bring palm wine, they brought their entire family trees to be scrutinized. Because her parents were custodians of high moral standing, Hidalgo's marriage was a diplomatic negotiation. Her comfort was guaranteed by wealth, but her freedom was limited by the very prestige that protected her. She became the standard bearer, where every action was compared to her mother's impeccable character. 2. Nwanaka, the strength of the soil. Nwanaka's name, sister is greater, defined her upbringing. Her home was a bustling hub of cousins, aunts, and shared meals. Her parents were known for their honesty and hard work in the local markets. When it came time for Nwanaka to wed, the community acted as her witnesses. Because her parents had good names in the village, names that weren't necessarily written in gold but in the hearts of neighbors, her marriage was met with ease. Suitors sought her because she came from a fruitful vine. Her comfort was found in the social security of a community that respected her roots. 3. Isioma, the wildflower. Isioma was the most radiant of the three, but her path was the most complex. Her parents were outliers, perhaps a bit too individualistic for the communal tastes of Umwomaku. While she excelled in her vocation after college, the investigative committees, the secret inquiries made by prospective in-laws often paused at her gate. In Africa, the character of the parent is often used as a mirror for the child. Isioma had to work twice as hard to prove that her character was her own, not a replica of her parents' perceived shortcomings. Her journey toward marriage was a battle against the fate dictated by her family background. The philosophy of the background check. In the context of Umwomaku, the consultation of parents is not merely a formality, it is a safety net. The logic is as follows. Conflict resolution. When a marriage hits a storm, it is the two families who steady the boat. If the parents are of good character, the marriage has a foundation of wisdom to lean on. Genetic and moral mapping. There is a deep-seated belief that the apple does not fall far from the tree. Villagers look for patterns of temperament, health, and industry. The collective identity. A marriage is seen as a union that can either bring Arja, San, shame, or Ola, gold, honor, to the entire kindred. Conclusion. Destiny and the village square. Hidalgo, Nawanaka, and Isioma represent the three faces of the African maiden. While their education at Queen of the Rosary College gave them the tools to navigate the modern world, it was the threshold of their fathers' houses that determined their entry into their new homes. In Umwomaku, beauty might attract a suitor, but it is the whisper of the lineage that seals the union. Their lives prove that while destiny and fate direct the heart, the footprints of the parents often pave the road the children must walk. The progression from the playground of Umwomaku Community Primary School to the halls of Queen of the Rosary College (QRC) served as a crucible for these three maidens. In the African traditional setting, traits are rarely viewed as individual quirks. They are seen as seeds that will eventually bloom into either fruitful harvest or thorns for the family. Here is how their paths diverged across their formative years and the impact on their futures. 1. Hidalgo, the golden cage of perfection. Primary and secondary years. In primary school, Hidalgo was the girl whose uniform was always starched stiff. She never played in the red dust because her mother warned her that a daughter of the soil must not look like the soil. At QRC, she was the senior prefect. Her leadership was efficient but cold. She was respected, yet feared. Her trait was perfectionism, driven by the heavy weight of her father's status. Impact on future. Positive. She secured a marriage to a high-ranking diplomat. Her life is one of luxury, comfort, and international travel. Negative. Because she was raised to be a custodian of image, she lacks emotional intimacy. Her marriage is a series of polished performances. She is wealthy but lonely, constantly terrified that a single mistake will shame her lineage. 2. Nawanaka, the strength of the common touch. Primary and secondary years. Nawanaka was the girl who shared her lunch. In primary school, she was the one who mediated fights. At QRC, she wasn't the top of the class, but she was the mother of the house in the dormitory. Her trait was communal resilience. She learned early that her value was tied to how she lifted others, a direct reflection of her parents' industrious and open door policy. Impact on future. Positive. She married a local entrepreneur. While they aren't diplomat wealthy, they are community rich. Her home is always full, and she is the most beloved woman in Umwomaku. Her future is stable and anchored in deep social capital. Negative. She often neglects her own ambitions. Her fate became being the pillar for everyone else, sometimes at the expense of her own physical and mental rest. 3. Isioma, the fire of independence. Primary and secondary years. Isioma was the one who asked, why? In primary school, she climbed the mango trees the boys were told were off limits. At QRC, she was often in labor room detention, not for malice, but for breaking minor rules to express her individuality. Her trait was rebellious curiosity. Because her parents didn't strictly enforce village norms, she grew up without the internal filter the others had. Impact on future. Positive. She became a successful fashion designer in the city, carving a destiny entirely her own. She married for love, choosing a man who saw her as an equal rather than a daughter of Umwomaku. Negative. The village gossips about her. When her marriage faced initial struggles, her parents were blamed for not taming her. She carries a sense of exile, feeling like she can never truly return to the village fold. What could have been done to guarantee a better future? To ensure a good future, one that balances African communal values with individual fulfillment, certain interventions could have shifted the trajectories. For Hidalgo, humanizing the pedigree. Her parents should have allowed her to fail. By treating her only as a vessel for family honor, they robbed her of a personality. A good future for her would have involved more play and less polishing. If she had been taught that her value existed apart from her father's title, she might have found a marriage based on companionship rather than a merger of assets. For Nwanaka, encouraging self-actualization, the community and her parents could have pushed her to seek personal ambition alongside her communal duties. While she is comfortable, she is also a workhorse. Guaranteeing her a better future would have meant teaching her that no is a valid answer, ensuring she didn't burn out while carrying the weight of two families. For Isioma, bridging the gap, her parents could have played a more active role in cultural diplomacy. Independence is a virtue, but in the African context, no man is an island. If her parents had helped her navigate village traditions while supporting her spirit, she wouldn't have had to choose between her identity and her heritage. A good future for her would have been one where she was an innovator within her community, rather than a rebel outside of it. Summary of the Umuomaku Maidens. Adaugo, the elite. Nwanaka, the pillar. Isioma, the rebel. Ultimately, the story of these three maidens highlights the African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." However, it also warns that the village must be careful not to crush the child's spirit under the weight of tradition and family background.
The suitor must be worthy.
May the ancestors bless this union.
We call upon the spirits of the land. Adaugo, Nwaneka, Isioma. The spirits of our fathers are present. Do you accept this union?
In the village of Umuomaku, the marriage inquiry, known as Iju SA, is a rigorous spiritual and social forensic audit. It is the moment where the private lives of ancestors are dragged into the village square. When suitors came for Adaugo, Nwanaka, and Isioma, the elders did not just look at the girls, they looked at the ghost standing behind them. Here is an extensive look at the whispers, the testimonies, and the ancestral skeletons that emerged during these inquiries. 1. Adaugo, the heavy price of an arrogant lineage. When a high-profile family from a neighboring town came for Adaugo, the inquiry was conducted with hushed voices among the titled men. The revisit of good deeds. The suitors were told of Adaugo's grandfather, a man who donated vast lands for the community school. The blood of a giver runs in her, the elders noted. This was a strong point for the proposal. The evil that surfaced, however, during the private session with the Umuada, the daughters of the kindred, a bitter memory was revisited. Adaugo's grandmother was remembered as a woman who used her husband's influence to oppress widows in the village. The villagers' verdict, Agwo Nwa Onye Nuru. Whose child is this snake? They whispered. They feared that Adaugo's starched perfection hid a heart as cold as her grandmother's. The result, the proposal survived only because of her father's current wealth, but the suitor's family was warned, you are marrying a queen, but make sure she does not turn your home into a court where you are the servant. 2. Nwanaka, the harvest of a good name. Nwanaka's inquiry was less like a trial and more like a celebration. Because her parents were the breath of the village, the information flowed like sweet palm wine. The revisit of good deeds. The elders recalled a year of great famine when Nwanaka's grandfather opened his barns to everyone, asking for nothing in return. They remembered her mother's hands, which had delivered half the children in the village without losing a soul. The absence of evil. When the suitors asked if there was any madness or bad blood, hereditary issues, the villagers replied, in that house, even the soil is kind. The villagers' verdict. They told the suitors, you are not just taking a wife, you are taking a blessing. If you mistreat her, the whole of Umuomaku will be your enemy. The result, the proposal was sealed instantly. The bride price was lowered as a gesture of respect because her family's character was considered a payment in itself. 3. Isioma, the ghost of the unsettled debt. Isioma's beauty was enough to bring many suitors, but her inquiry was where the fire met the water. The revisit of evil. This was the most painful inquiry. The villagers revisited an old scandal involving Isioma's great-uncle, who was accused of land grabbing and had died, mysteriously, a sign in traditional belief of a curse or Alusi deity intervention. The parental influence, her father's decision to live a modern life, ignoring the traditional cleansing of that old family debt, was brought up. The villagers told the suitors, the father eats the sour grape, and the children's teeth are set on edge. The villagers' verdict, they whispered that Isioma's rebellious nature wasn't just modernity, it was the restless spirit of her lineage. The result, termination. One major proposal from a very traditional family was terminated. The suitor's mother stated plainly, "We cannot bring a daughter of that compound into our house. We do not want to inherit a debt we did not owe." Isioma was judged not for her own sins, but for the evil her ancestors failed to atone for. The anatomy of the inquiry. Why proposals were terminated. In Umuomaku, a proposal is usually terminated based on 3 specific, revisited categories. Reason for termination: the traditional logic impact on the maiden. Ego muo, spirit debt. If an ancestor died of a bad death, swollen stomach, lightning, or committed an abomination, aruru ala, that wasn't cleansed. Isioma suffered this. It suggests the marriage will be barren or plagued by tragedy. Agua nne, mother's character, the belief that a daughter is a photocopy of her mother's secret behaviors. Hidalgo faced scrutiny here. If the mother was unfaithful or a thief, the proposal is often dropped. Awu nna, father's reputation. If the father is known to be a coward or a liar, it is believed that seed is weak. A father's evil acts in land disputes or community betrayal can end a daughter's chances with noble families. The power of the living memory. These stories show that in the African marriage system, time is a circle. The good deeds of a grandfather decades ago can act as a spiritual dowry for a girl like Nwanika, making her path smooth. Conversely, the evil or arrogance of a past generation can act as a wall, blocking the path of a girl like Isioma, regardless of her education or beauty. In Umuomaku, the villagers are the librarians of these histories. Their tongues can either build a home or burn a bridge before the
Prisons. While Adalgo's world is gilded but cold, Nwaneka finds joy and warmth in the heart of the community. Come, don't be shy. There is enough for everyone. The aroma alone is enough to make you hungry. We are so happy to be here. Come, don't be shy. There is enough for everyone. The aroma alone is enough to make you hungry. We are so happy to be here.
The lives of Hidalgo, Nwanika, and Isioma serve as a case study for the Igbo proverb, "The person who carries an odious smell does not walk alone. The wind carries the scent to everyone around them." In Umuomaku, a woman's conduct after the marriage inquiry is seen as the fruit of the ancestral seeds planted during the Iju essay. Here is how their individual characters and the shadows of their lineages rippled through their immediate circles. 1. Hidalgo, the golden cage of arrogance. Because the elders warned that Hidalgo's lineage was arrogant and oppressive, her domestic life became a theater of power struggles. Impact on her husband. Her husband, though wealthy, lived in a state of social exhaustion. Hidalgo treated their marriage like a political alliance rather than a union. She was known to remind him constantly that her family's land and influence were the pillars of his success. He became a man who was respected in the market but silenced in his own parlor. Impact on her children. Her children grew up with a superiority complex. They were the best dressed at the village square but were often lonely. Neighbors discouraged the children from playing with the Hidalgo's royal brood, fearing the children had inherited their mother's sharp, belittling tongue. Impact on neighbors and friends. Hidalgo didn't have friends, she had subjects. She would gift expensive wrappers to neighbors only to use those gifts as leverage to demand favors later. Her household was a place of high standards and low warmth. 2. Nwanika, the oasis of the village. Nwanika's marriage became an extension of her parents' open barn policy. Because she was raised where the soil is kind, her home became a sanctuary. Impact on her husband. Her husband's prestige skyrocketed. In Umwomaku, a man with a virtuous wife is seen as a man who eats with the gods. Because Nwanika was a peace seeker, her husband's mind was calm, allowing him to excel in his trade and rise to the rank of an Ozo-titled man. Impact on her children. Her children became the standard for the village. When other parents corrected the children, they would say, "Look at Nwanika's daughter. She walks with the grace of her mother." They inherited the healing hands of the grandmother, becoming the first point of contact for anyone in distress. Impact on neighbors. Her house had no fences, figuratively and literally. On feast days, her kitchen was the communal engine room. Neighbors felt a sense of ownership over her success because she made her prosperity feel like a shared village resource. 3. Isioma, the heavy burden of the unseen. Isioma's life is the most tragic, as she became a marked woman. Even after she eventually married a man from a distant town, who cared less for Umwomaku's traditions, the ghosts followed her. Impact on her husband. Her husband lived in a state of perpetual defensiveness. He had to constantly prove the village wrong. Every time Isioma showed a spark of independence or anger, he would secretly wonder, is this the restless spirit they warned me about? The psychological weight of her unsettled debt created a subtle, lingering distrust in their intimacy. Impact on her children. Her children grew up with a sense of ancestral anxiety. They were often shielded from their maternal kin in Umwomaku, leading to a disconnected identity. They were told stories of their beauty and intelligence, but also sensed the forbidden nature of their mother's history. Impact on family. The parents, Isioma's father, who had ignored the traditional cleansing, lived to see his daughter's struggles as his greatest failure. The modernity he hid behind offered no protection against the social isolation his.
We accept the wine. May this union bring prosperity to both our families. To the happy couple.
In many African cultures, particularly within the